Hello, class. This is your president, Barack Obama, and as you can see, I put on a few pounds and turned considerably more gray. And in the last week or so, to say my life has resembled a poorly written country western song would be stating the least. The past week or so, I've had surgery, lost my best friend, and my favorite dog has ran off and left me. Now, isn't that a byline for a great country western song or what? Having said that, I would like to go ahead and start my speech. During my administration, my time as president of our great country, a lot of things have been thrown my way. As president, you get hit with a multitude of situations on a daily basis, and not all of them are international affairs. A lot of domestic issues come up, such as disasters and things with the economy and the ever looming terrorist threat that we're always confronted with. But one of the things that I've had to uh, combat that no other president in the history of this office has been the issue of racism. There has never been a president who sat in this chair in this Oval Office who's had to endure the amount of disrespect afforded to me from congressional members and also members of the Senate and other cabinet subcommittees, so forth, throughout the government. Not only that, from your basic citizenry, the office of the presidency used to be respected. Even if you didn't particularly agree with the person who was elected, once they were elected, everyone rallied behind pretty much and got behind the president and got on with the business of running the country for the sake of the betterment of the country. But this has not been the case throughout my time. And I'm not making excuses, but for a lot of the legislation that goes through, a president, besides executive order, cannot do it on his own. Unfortunately, to get some crucial issues passed into law that were for the betterment of the country, both Democratic and Republican, both black and white, both richer and poor, I had to resort to executive order because I could not get congressional support, basically because of my skin color, being an African American, and also being a Democratic president. I don't know if you guys remember, but during my first administration, the Speaker of the House got up in front of the entire world, CNN and all news channels and media outlets, and stated that he would not lend support to any initiatives brought forth by this office of presidency or myself, nor would he be willing to work with anyone on any initiatives that were of democratic construction. When you're faced with this type of opposition, it's nearly impossible to get anything done, no matter what the merit of the bill is. But having said all that, their cooler heads prevailed on the Hill, and we were able to bridge some gaps, make some headways into bipartisanship, and get some things done. A few of the legislations that I was able to pass were the Act toward Congressional Gold Medal to the foot soldiers who participated in Bloody Sunday. That was a turnaround event on the final Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March. An act making appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for the fiscal year ending in September, protecting volunteer firefighters and emergency responders act. The Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention for American Veterans Act, the Terrorism Risk Insurance Program Reauthorization Act for 2015, which is very important because in the event of another terror event, if you volunteer to work in a recovery operations, and as a result of that, because of the fumes and the toxic buildup of the dismantled area, you become ill later on down the road. This act protects you. Up until now, insurance companies didn't have to cover you because you got ill off of being exposed by toxic materials from, a fallen building or something like that. Tax Increase Prevention Act of 2014, and also the Carl Levin and Howard P. Buck McClellan National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2015 that guarantees automatic funding for our services which are already in place overseas, so those men and women won't be put in harm's way because of physicalities or fiduciary situations here back at home. I can go on, and there are several more, and I know recently, I've been passing a lot of bills to executive order. These are bills that had to be passed to ensure the running of the government. As you know, we have a new faction to deal with in Capitol Hill called the Tea Party, and they help us more than they hurt us from a Democratic standpoint, because they are a constant thorn in the side of the plank members of the GOP. So, having addressed these issues, I would like to move on to another issue, and that's the issue addressing the black community, which I am a part of, which I was raised in. And I want to say to those of you who think that as president, and me being a black person, that I can only address black issues and concerns, you're sadly mistaken. I have to address the issues of all Americans. I have to look out for the welfare of all Americans and all Americans. This is one of the things that's constantly on my mind. I see what is happening in black America. I understand about the prison industrial complex. I understand the racism involved with the mandatory sentencing guidelines. This is why I had directed the Honorable Eric Holder to pull back on the guidelines, and the guidelines no longer exist. Now, if you get caught with cocaine or crack cocaine, the sentences is the same. You do go before a judge now. There's not automatic guidelines anymore. So we're reviewing cases from the past. There will be people getting out of prison who served the adequate number of years who should have never been in prison in the first place. We're talking first-time offenders with minute amounts of these drugs on them. Also, we're looking at overhauling the entire prison system. We're going to make sure that once a person is incarcerated, they're given the necessary skills to come out a better person than when they went in. If they don't have high school education or GDP, they will get that necessary training while they're in. Otherwise, they won't be allowed back into society. It makes no sense to lock up a person and hold them for a crime that they've committed and release them in worse shape than they were when they first came in. How does that serve society? And looking at the cost of almost $60,000 per inmate per year, when we were educating our inmates, we were only spending a fraction of that because we weren't dealing with the repeat revolving door syndrome that we have now. This is an issue that has plagued the black community and has affected the black community deeply in terms of number of male students who are attending college, and also fatherless homes. This situation, if you reach out to a black person and ask them in this country, do they have anyone in their family in jail right now because of drugs, and they will tell you they do. It touches just about every black American family in this country. And that's saying a lot. And it's been a very successful program for whoever devised it and implemented it, and obviously made money for it. They've made a ton of money. These are some of the issues that I want to address. I'm going to be signing a lot of executive orders as it is done at my pleasure at the end of my presidency. This is what all presidents do. At the end of their presidency, they sign executive orders exonerating certain individuals for deeds or whatever, and most oftentimes it's done to gain favor in order to get a lucrative position in the civilian world as a lobbyist or a consultant. I'm going to do this for the betterment of people in righting wrongs that were done, specifically, well, within the black community and certain drug cases that were landmark cases, certain cases that have been prevalent, and also I'm going I'm going to initiate some executive orders that's going to correct our judiciary and law enforcement agencies. Grand juries will no longer be state organized; they will be federally organized and ran. A grand jury must contain at least 50% of the race of the person accused. This will cut down on the disparities that we have where justice is just not obtainable because the 10 to 12 people on the grand jury are of a different race than the person accused. And if we've seen the statistics that all point that in situations such as this, justice is never rendered appropriately. These are things that we should not as a nation be facing at this point in history, but these are things that we are. This is a lot of reason why America is called a hypocrite, the great democratic hypocrite throughout the world, and this is the reason why a lot of countries mock us and make fun of us, especially our Islamic brothers. It's very hypocritical for us to cruise the world and call ourselves the policemen of democracy, and we don't have democracy here at home for all of our citizens. This is going to change, and it's going to change now. As president, I'm going to make sure it changes. This is my solemn pledge to you. And having said that, I bid you all a good night. God bless you, and let's wake up and work for a better America tomorrow.